Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we connect people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Ballot. I'm your host, Norm Leahy. I'm a senior editor at Ballotpedia. And, of course, there's an election coming up. It doesn't affect everyone in the country, but there's a surprising number of interesting races on the ballot that a lot of people are paying attention to, not the least of which are yes, they're all experts, subject experts at Ballotpedia, and we're going to be joined by some of those folks today. They're going to talk about elections that really are closest to us. Local elections, mayors, for example, state legislators. In a couple of states, there's a couple of big gubernatorial elections going on. There's even a couple of special elections for Congress and a state Supreme Court election. But joining me today from Ballotpedia, my colleagues are Joel Williams. Joel, wave the camera. Ellen Morrissey, no, wave, hi. And Doug Kronizel. Doug, good to see you all. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. Now let's, I want to start, Joel, with a big picture. What's the big theme, if there is one, that links all of the elections going on November 4th? Can you think of one?
That's the hard first question, Alligate.
We're not here playing tiddlywinks. This is fun.
I've got one.
Good.
I think a common theme you'll see is, especially in odd year elections, the way you'll hear a lot of people talk about them is as kind of like, roadmaps or instructions for, I guess, how parties should deal with the upcoming midterms or presidential election. And you'll see a lot of people kind of extrapolate either, lessons or predictions from these races for future races, which may or may not be true, but, that's kind of a big narrative oftentimes in these off-year cycles.
Yes, and that is something that I live in Virginia. It's something that we've been told and are mildly proud of, is that this is a test bed for themes that might show up in the midterm elections. We'll see if that's actually true, but certainly all of the elections that we're going to talk about today, the top 10 that Joel have picked out as an editorial team, are among those that we'll be watching most closely. And I want to let's just dive right in with the gubernatorial elections. Two states, Virginia and New Jersey, will be electing new governors this year. What are we looking at there? Joel, are you handling that one?
Yeah, so Virginia governor, obviously you're there. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it, is the big one everybody's watching. Virginia's just a unique state in that their term limit is one term, so the incumbent governor can never run again. They usually go on to do other things anyway. But this year we've got Abigail Spanberger, U.S. representative, and Winsome Earl-Sears, who's the sitting lieutenant governor, competing for that race. Spanberger, Democrat, Earl-Sears, Republican. The race rating outlets seem to favor Spanberger on this. They lean the race either likely Dem or lean Dem. And recent polling averages have Spanberger up at like 50% to Earl-Sears at like 44%. Mm-hmm. This is a situation where Democrats can take what we call trifecta control of a government. Right now, they've got a Republican governor, but Democrats control both chambers of the legislature. So if Democrats win the governorship, they'll have control of all of those things, and less likely gubernatorial vetoes, things like that. Such a situation where they can pick up a trifecta.
Right, and it goes. Let's hop up the coastline a little bit. Allie, can you tell us a little bit about New Jersey?
Yeah, so in New Jersey, we have a open race. The incumbent is also term limited. Incumbent Phil Murphy, a Democrat. So we have on the Democratic side, Mikey Sherrill, a U.S. House representative. And then on the Republican side, we have Jack Ciattarelli, who is a former member of the New Jersey General Assembly and also last year's Republican nominee. This race, Cheryl has kind of started out as the favorite, and I think is still favored to win based on polling. Most polling recently has shown her ahead. However, the amount she is ahead and how far outside of she remains, most polls show her 5 to 10 points ahead, but there have been some kind of noteworthy outlier polls that show a much tighter race, including a poll out of Emerson College at the beginning of September, which the New York Times poll trackers call it an outlier poll, but still kind of something to watch. And looking kind of back historically, there's kind of some interesting trends that to watch here. In New Jersey's history, voters have not elected a member of the same party for 3 consecutive gubernatorial terms since 1961. So this would be kind of a big deal for 2 Murphy terms, and then a third Democratic term would be bucking that trend. However, if you look at 8 of the last 10 gubernatorial elections from 1985 to 2021, voters always elected in 8 of the 10 elections, voters elected a governor from the opposite party of the sitting president. So sitting president is currently Trump.
So we'll have historical trends colliding potentially.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. So now let's we're going to move through these big quickly, and then we'll have some more specifics later. But Ellen, take us to Texas in the 18th Congressional District, a special election for the U.S. House of Representatives. The first question, of course, is this election going to take place under the newly redrawn congressional districts?
No, this will be under the old districts. So the map from before the most recent round of redistricting.
Okay. So what are the particulars of this one?
Yeah. So this is the 5th special election to the U.S. House that has happened this year. This one was called after Representative Sylvester Turner, a Democrat, passed away back in March. We've got Amanda Edwards, Yolanda Jones, Christian Menifee, and Carmen Montiel. The first 3 are Democrats. Montiel is a Republican, are running in this special election. This is kind of all parties are running in the same election here. And then if no one wins an outright majority, the top 2 candidates will advance to a runoff. This interesting fact, the winner of this election will also be the 4th person to represent this district since 2024.
Since 2024?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
It almost makes that a prize that one doesn't want to win because you get a temporary occupant.
Yeah.
But explain this to me. If this is going to be an election under the old maps, the ones that were passed following the census, and not the new ones, which go into effect when, in the new year?
Yeah, it'll be 2026.
Yeah.
So the 18th district, as it exists for this election, presumably changes, correct?
Yes.
How does it change enough? Does it disappear, or does it just get tweaked a little bit? I mean, does this going to be? I guess what I'm getting at is are we going to be electing a representative here who doesn't have a district?
I'll jump in with that answer. Short answer, kind of yes.
Okay.
It's widely expected in the media that whoever wins the seat is going to be running against another sitting incumbent Democratic representative in some sort of redrawn district in the area.
Okay. So this is going to be, yes, special election. But we're going to be revisiting this one, aren't we?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Well, that's why we do what we do. And I want to come back, Joel, you volunteered. Talk to me about the Virginia House of Delegates.
Yes, so this is a situation where the chamber is literally as tight as it possibly can be. Democrats have a 51-48 majority with 1 vacancy, which is a Republican vacancy. So Democrats have to basically hold all of the seats they currently hold, not lose any if they want to keep the majority, and Republicans have to pick up some seats. Notably, we were talking about historical trends earlier with New Jersey. The state house has changed partisan hands in every election since 2019. So if Democrats hold control, that's kind of bucking our recent historical trend there. And again, we talked earlier with the governor's race, the trifecta status. Obviously, if Republicans pick up the House, that sort of, they can't win a trifecta because the Senate's not up, but they could at best kind of like hold on to the divided government they have. One other really interesting late breaking, still developing story is Democrats in Virginia have now introduced a plan to potentially redistrict ahead of the next congressional elections. So that would require them basically passing a plan now before the new election winners are sworn in January, and then also pass it again. So if Republicans win control in the elections, they can kind of foil that plan as well.
Right. And there's a lot of moving parts to that, and a lot that is just rather astonishing. And we have a whole podcast that touches on that, and we'll link to that down in the show notes. But let's move on. Doug, you're up to talk to me about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which, just as a sidestep, most people don't realize. And Doug, tell me if these numbers are wrong. There are roughly 30-odd thousand elected judges in states across the country. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. Not Supreme Court justices. A lot of them are like municipal judges and things like that. But yeah, a lot of elected judges out there.
Right, who do things like adjudicate traffic tickets, divorces, probate, all kinds of stuff. The stuff that actually affects us. But anyway, talk to me about the Pennsylvania court.
Yeah, a little bit different for them. But this year in Pennsylvania, so they're having retention elections. And we don't really talk about retention elections a whole lot. But in Pennsylvania, when it's time for an incumbent justice, they've got a term length. And then at the end of the term, rather than going up against, an opposing candidate who wants to run for that seat, you have a retention election where it's just a yes/no question and that person's name. And then voters say, should this person stay in office or do you want them to be removed from office? Most judges who stand for retention stay in office. It's very rare for judges to lose retention. I think in Pennsylvania, it hasn't happened since it's happened once since 1968, and happened back in 2005 where a judge was not retained. And then nationwide, it's not just rare in Pennsylvania, it's rare nationwide. There was a justice in Oklahoma in 2024 who was not retained. But by and large, that these things usually aren't, I don't know where they're placed on the Pennsylvania ballot, but I know that on my ballot in South Dakota, retention elections are pretty kind of far down there. It's just a yes or no question. So we'll see how that all turns out. But it is an important vote, nevertheless, regardless of the trends in favor of justices being retained, because Democrats have a 5-2 majority on the court right now. And so there are 3 Democratic justices who are up for retention this year. The Democrats want to retain at least 2 of those justices, at the very least, in order to maintain their majority on the court. Because if anybody is not retained, if they're removed from office, well, then in 2027, you will have an actual election for that position on the Supreme Court where people are going to run against each other. And so then that would open the door. If 2 justices are not retained, that would open the door in 2027 for Republicans to potentially create a majority on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. In between now in 2027, the governor, Josh Shapiro, who's a Democrat, would get to appoint new individuals to sit in that position. He would have to get confirmation from the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans. So that would probably be an interesting process to kind of go about carrying out. But then in 2027, anybody who's not retained, then that seat would be an open election, more or less. My guess is that whoever gets appointed would probably want to run for re-election, but you never know.
You never know. And speaking of not ever knowing, nobody really saw this coming in Virginia. We're going back to the Commonwealth. Joel, tell us about the Attorney General's race in Virginia.
Oh, Lord. There's a lot going on here.
Take a deep breath, condense, and go.
Yeah, so you've got the incumbent Attorney General, Jason Miyares, who's a Republican. And running against him is Jay Jones, a Democrat, who is a former member of the House of Delegates. And so Miyares actually won the seat. I'm going to use your least favorite word here, flipped it from Mark Herring in
Just like a
2021.
pancake.
Yes. And so that seats up, and that's just an interesting situation where, typically with a down ballot race like this, you'd think, oh, it most likely just kind of followed the headwinds of the top of the ticket, right? Like if Spamberger wins big, the Democrats going to win the AG race, Democrats are going to win down ballot, that sort of thing. In this situation, there's been a couple of, I guess we would call them scandals on Jay Jones's side that have come up. Some stuff related to a speeding ticket and community service, and then some text messages that he sent previously that, even folks in his own party are saying, yeah, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
And kind of hesitant to support him. So that seems like the one spot where Republicans maybe have some hope. If you're looking at like the broader media landscape of how people are talking about these races, AG seems to be the one where they have the most confidence that they can pull out a victory.
You mean Republicans?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Republicans. And being Attorney General in Virginia obviously has some power there. They're not under the governor's control so much, so they could join, for example, Republican state lawsuits against the federal government. Should those come up, can obviously rule on constitutionality on things, or give opinions on them for, redistricting, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and it's if that works out, Virginia hasn't had a split among its top 3 statewide office holders, I believe, since 2005. So it's been a while since we've had a mixed bag partisanship in those top 3 offices. So we'll have to see. But let's move on quickly to the Georgia Public Service Commission, Joel.
Yes, these are elections that I think some would say have been a long time coming. These have been a series of, over the last several years, canceled and moved and just pushed around elections over some court-ordered back and forth about redistricting. The way the commission works is there are 5 different districts that are unique geographic districts in the state, but then all the positions are elected statewide. So there's been just all sorts of back and forth lawsuits about this. They finally settled those and are having an election. Long story short, all 5 commissioners are Republicans. I think Republicans are generally favored to win the elections to begin with, but Democrats could knock it down to like a 3-2 majority with, obviously at that point, a chance to win majorities in future elections. Generally, the role just involves kind of like regulations of utility services and that sort of stuff. So it's not like a big, sexy office like a gubernatorial office, but it is just a really interesting series of events that have led us here.
Okay, and then let's go up to Minnesota, a mayoral race in Minneapolis. Doug, tell us about that one real quick.
Yeah, let's get into it. So Minneapolis, we've got incumbent Mayor Jacob Frey running against 14 other people. There's 15 people running for mayor of Minneapolis this November. But a lot of the media attention has been focused on a state senator, Omar Fateh, was elected to the Senate in 2020. Frey was elected mayor of Minneapolis first in 2017, beat an incumbent in that race, and then was reelected in 2021. So these races in Minneapolis are nonpartisan, but candidates can choose to put a party label under their name. So both Frey and Fateh have chosen to put the Democratic Farmer Labor Party label under their names, and that's just the Minnesota specific name for the Democratic Party. Right. And I will, from here on out, just call it DFL to save time. So the DFL has controlled the Minneapolis mayorship for decades, since like 1978. So that doesn't really look like it's going to change. But this is one of those races that has kind of highlighted divisions within the party itself, within the Democratic Party itself. So Fateh has received endorsements from U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, the Working Families Party, and the Twin Cities DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. Frey has gotten endorsements from like the local Teamsters, but then Amy Klobuchar, the U.S. Senator, Tim Walz, the incumbent governor, and the real kind of, intrigue in this race has really stemmed from some of those endorsements themselves. The Minneapolis DFL, the local Democratic Party, back in July endorsed Fate, which surprised a lot of people. But then, because they didn't endorse the incumbent mayor, but then the state DFL, the Minnesota State Party, actually rescinded that endorsement following allegations of irregularities in the vote tabulation, which I learned was just an Excel spreadsheet that had broken formulas in it. That's what they were tallying all their votes in. And then there were some cells that, someone didn't copy or paste a formula into, which then, messed up the numbers. So always check your spreadsheets, people. This is your note, or else the state party will rescind your endorsement. But the local party tried to appeal that decision, but then the state executive committee shot that down. And so that's been, its own sort of thing that's been happening in this race. But yeah, Minneapolis has kind of undergone a lot of changes in the city governance since the George Floyd protests in 2020. In 2023, more progressive candidates sort of claimed a majority on the city council. A number of them have endorsed Fate in this race. So there's been a lot of movement in sort of how Minneapolis is being governed, and it's kind of been happening successively over the past few elections. And this is ranked choice voting. I mentioned 15 candidates at the top. It's ranked choice. So we've gone through that on previous podcasts before as well. But Frey has always gotten the most first votes in his two races, first round votes, but in both instances, they did go to second rounds of counting. And I would be astounded if with 15 people, we didn't have at least 2 rounds of counting in this race.
Yes, so there'll be a lot of late nights in Minneapolis. And speaking of late nights, the city that never sleeps, Ellen, tell us about New York, and its mayoral race that seems to have captivated so many people across the country.
Yeah, so pretty interestingly, this year we've got a competitive general election for New York City mayor. Oftentimes, this race gets kind of decided during the Democratic primary, since the city is a pretty Democratic place. The Democrat tends to just kind of win the general without much fanfare. However, this time around, we've got kind of a semi-rematch going on from the primary. We've got our 3 main candidates we have Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee, who is also running on the Working Families Party ballot line. New York has something called fusion voting, where one candidate can run under multiple parties. Our Republican nominee is Curtis Sliwa, who is also running on the Protect Animals Party ballot line. And then finally, this is where the rematch comes in. We've got Andrew Cuomo running as an independent on the Fight and Deliver Party ballot line. They're all running to succeed Mayor Eric Adams, who, well, maybe we'll get into Eric Adams in a minute. A little bio on each of these candidates. Mamdani is a assembly member. He was first elected in 2020. Sliwa is the founder of an organization called the Guardian Angels, which is focused on combating street crime and wearing berets. Cuomo, he served as the governor of New York from 2011 to 2021. He resigned in 2021 following a couple different allegations surrounding mishandling of nursing homes during COVID and allegations of sexual harassment. He denies wrongdoing in both cases.
Yes, and then there's the one that they're now all running to succeed is Eric Adams, who dropped out of the general election after he ran as an independent in the.
So he initially declared, he currently is the sitting governor. He was elected as a Democrat, but then he was indicted for he was alleged to have taken bribes, I think, from the Turkish government or something like that, or accepted gifts. And then that indictment was dropped. So he was kind of an embattled candidate going into this. He started in the Democratic primary saying, I'm running in the Democratic primary. Then he dropped out of the Democratic primary and said he was running as an independent. And then only a couple weeks ago, he dropped out of the general election as well, and ended up endorsing Cuomo.
And this one has gotten a lot of attention nationally because of, well, it's New York City, and that's where most of the major legacy media is still headquartered. So it's like covering the race in your backyard. That makes sense to me. But it's also, there's a stark contrast between, and it's got a stark contrast between what the candidates believe, but they've also been throwing some sharp elbows, right?
Definitely, yeah. It's been pretty critical. I think anyone who's maybe watched clips from the debate, there's quite a bit of like sparring and kind of gotcha moments there.
Yeah, because it's a reminder to everyone everywhere that New York City politics is a contact sport.
Yeah.
And unless you're willing to get a little bit bloody along the way, you shouldn't play the game at all. But let's go somewhere that's a little bit more low-key, at least ostensibly, and that's Seattle, where they have a mayoral race. And Doug, tell us about that one.
All righty. So we got another incumbent versus a challenger sort of race going on here. You've got the incumbent mayor, Bruce Harrell, is running for re-election. Katie Wilson is co-founder of the Transit Riders Union in Seattle, is the challenger. It's a nonpartisan race, and unlike Minneapolis, you can't put a party label under your name in Washington. So no party labels on the ballot. But the two candidates emerged from a primary back in August that featured 8 candidates total. And in that primary, Wilson, who's the challenger, the non-incumbent, actually came out about 10 points ahead of Harrell in the primary to advance to the general election. It was like 51 to 41% or so coming out of there. And now we are, looking at the general election. What's interesting about Seattle, that we're all about bucking trends today. And Seattle is a unique one because being an incumbent is usually a really good thing when it comes to running for. If you want to run for re-election, being an incumbent is great. Your odds of winning are much higher in those scenarios. That is not true in Seattle. Seattle has not re-elected a mayor or has not had like a multi-term consecutive term mayor since 2005. Greg Nichols, whose term ended in 2009, was the last time that had happened. And so Harrell is hoping to buck that trend as well. But yeah, again, I mean, it's another one of those sort of races where you've got this, sort of outsider candidate versus the longtime political figure. Before he was mayor, he was president of the city council. He's on the city council for like a decade as well. Acting mayor for a week a few years ago during a change. But yeah, I mean, there are policy issues that have been coming up there. Housing, cost of living, which I know is also a thing in the New York City one. But like, yeah, cost of living is a big one. There were some propositions on the ballot in February in Seattle regarding social housing, and that's one of the items that Wilson cited about her getting into the race was not being pleased with Harrell's proposal versus Proposition 1A. The voters approved 1A, which and then rejected Harrell's proposal in that race. But there's a slew of other options. Items being discussed as well, homelessness, crime as well. So, that's the lay of the land there in Seattle. But we'll see how it all shakes out. There's been some polling. There's more money in this race, I think, than I saw when I was looking into the Minneapolis one. There's a PAC with like $1 million that was kind of getting involved there. So, seems like it's pretty lively up in Seattle heading into November.
So let's, I thank you all for that roundup. Those are our top 10 races. And now I want to add, in our last moments here on the show, I want to ask each of you, what if, it doesn't have to be one of these top 10 races. It could be one that we haven't discussed yet. But what is the personal race that you're looking at that you think is utterly fascinating, could be a surprise, is flying under the radar, or really could offer us some news that we'll be talking about a year from now. Joel, we'll start with you. You're on.
Oh man, aside from anything late breaking and crazy that happens in New York, I would say mine is probably the Philadelphia district attorney election.
Okay.
That's one where the incumbent is Larry Krasner, Democrat. He's kind of, getting more prominence nationally as part of this wave of, I think, more progressive prosecutors running for DA offices. He's actually facing, we talked about Democratic primary rematches earlier in New York. He's facing a Democratic primary rematch. His opponent from that also qualified for the Republican Party ballot line in Pennsylvania. You can do that there as well. And so they're running in the general election against each other. That'll be a fascinating race to watch.
Okay. And Ellen, I know your portfolio is generally national races, but what's the one that you think we ought to be paying attention to?
Let me fact check myself real quick to make sure I am remembering correctly. Okay, so something kind of big I'm watching on my local ballot here in New York City. We have a local ballot question that would move our local elections to presidential election years. So NYC mayor would no longer be elected in these kind of off-year elections where turnout tends to be lower. Instead, it would be a slugfest alongside the presidential slugfest. So I think that'll be something interesting to watch to see if that gets approved.
Would it still use ranked choice voting in the primaries?
I believe so.
I don't know. It's just a wrinkle. But yeah, and that's a thing too. A lot of places are considering moving their local elections to presidential or congressional midterm election years. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I think it's a trend you see elsewhere. Which, I think presidential and even midterm years, to a lesser extent, are just a magnet for, I think, participation. They're the elections that people participate in the most. So I think the thinking there is generally it's a way to get folks to, I don't know, be able to increase turnout in local elections.
Excellent. And Doug, how about you? What do you think we should be watching closely?
I like to think that all these efforts to consolidate election calendars for local elections is actually just the universe being kind to me, being the guy who's responsible for the team that's trying to cover all the local elections in the country. It's way easier when they're all happening on the same day. But on that note, with the local elections, I mean, we've got 29,000 candidates. In addition to these 10 races, there are 29,000 candidates with profiles on Ballotpedia who are going to be in elections in November. 13,000 elections. You've got thousands of elections in Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, Washington, New Mexico, all over the place that we're covering. And so one of those that stands out to me is this school board race in Ohio, the Mentor Exempted Village School District. It's just northeast of Cleveland. We covered it in 2023. And the reason that this race is interesting to me is because we've been kind of really we really honed in on these school board races back in 2021, the halcyon days, if you can think back that far, of the times when people were being like the language in school board elections in 2021 was very explicit. Like there was no effort to sort of like obfuscate or use any of the sort of like, am I kind of saying what you think I'm saying, or am I kind of like, introducing some obscurity to my campaign message or some vagueness to my campaign message? No, it's not the case. Back in 2021, people were very clear about, this is like an issue. That's when we were talking about masks, the pandemic, DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion was kind of popping up for the first time. But since then, we've sort of seen these races go through cycles of introducing that vagueness that we kind of tend to see in some other races. And that's really the case here. This is a school board that has a 3-2 split right now. It's nonpartisan. The races are nonpartisan, but it's a 3-2 split with the more progressive candidates with that majority. And so that majority is at stake. There's 3 seats up for election. Then I think the progressive candidates have to defend at least 2 of them to maintain that majority. And so we've had this back in like 2023, they were talking about Title IX. They were talking about the board's response to a state decision with regards to transgender students. But then this year, we've kind of entered that phase where you have everyone sort of saying the same thing. Like there are sides. It's one of the reasons why we really like getting endorsements at Ballotpedia, is because the 1776 Project PAC has endorsed one slate of candidates. The North Shore AFL-CIO has endorsed another slate of candidates. Now those groups are very clear about the things that they care about, which is helpful to a voter to see kind of who's supporting whom. But, you've got everyone's just kind of saying, we want schools to be safe. We want academics to be excellent. We want the budget to be good. But there's still this sort of like, a step back language that's happening there. And it's just interesting to see, because there was this effort over time to sort of, we always talk about like the bench, right? In like parties have a bench, and usually that bench is like, you get your state legislators, and then eventually they get called up to the big leagues and they run for the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate or governor or something like that. But it really felt like over the past few years, there was an attempt to extend that bench downward into local elections in some of these states as well, down into like school board, like considering the school board a bench, considering the city council a bench as well. And it's just really fascinating to see, as that process has gone on, now these races are sort of resembling the races that we tend to see. Now, I will say that this sort of like everyone's sort of saying the same thing language, you tend to only see that in districts that are a little bit more battlegroundy, for lack of a better word. If you're in a ruby red or solid blue district, you're going to be very clear with the things that you're saying out loud as well, because you know your audience. That's not really the case here. And so it's been a fascinating trajectory to watch these elections, and to see kind of where they go from there, just in terms of like how parties and how organizations engage with these local elections moving forward.
And as a reminder, Tim Kaine, Richmond product, started out as a member of the Richmond City Council, made his way up to the U.S. Senate, and a vice presidential candidate. So it's been done. And to our listeners and viewers, go look at how Grover Cleveland got his start in politics. You might learn something there too. Anyway, that's for a podcast for another time entirely. And to everybody out there, you can, of course, listen to these podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. And you can, of course, see us on YouTube, and we appreciate our YouTube viewers very much. And if you want to find out more about the top 10 elections that we're watching, of course, they'll be in the show notes. They're on our website, of course, as well as all of the material that goes into the background of those races. And, of course, there's a wealth of other stuff that'll keep you abreast of politics, big, small, and policy developments, large and opaque. So please check out the website, check us out wherever you can, and subscribe to the Daily Brew too, so you can get politics every day delivered right to your mailbox. But Doug, Joel, Ellen, thanks for being on the ballot. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Oh yeah,
everybody. It was great, and we'll be talking to you soon in another episode. And until then, I'm Norm Leahy, and I will see you in the digital pages of Ballotpedia. Take care.